Hello, this is Let's Talk About Myths, baby. And I am your host, Liv, here with yet another of the conversation episodes that I have scheduled for this month, and which are going to continue on because, yes, I scheduled too many of them, and yes, I still have so many more cool people that I can talk to about super cool topics. I just recently recorded another of the conversations, and honestly, I just cannot wait for you all to hear all of them. It is such a fun series and I'm super pumped to get to do it. But today, yes, I am back with what I promised originally, the wonderful fan favorite Anwen Kya Hayward, author of Hear the World Entire and lover of Medusa, re-recorded our Medea episode so that you all get to hear it. It's bigger and better than the one we fucked up. So I hope you enjoy. Also, if you are at all interested in the 1960s Jason and the Argonauts movie that Anwen brings up and that I admit I have not yet seen, tune in to my Twitter on the weekend because we're still working out the time frame, but Anwen and I are going to watch that movie and live tweet it. I'm really excited. I know that there are stop motion skeletons and that is about it. So I am ready. And with that, I give you Conversations. Jason has the personality of a used dishcloth. Medea with Anwen Kya Hayward. We are here again today to talk to Anwen Kya Hayward about Medea. As my listeners know, this is a redo, but it's going to be better than the one we lost.
Hopefully.
Exactly. So thank you so much for talking to me again about Medea.
I mean, it's a good way to spend a Sunday evening. It's fine by me.
I think so. I'm glad to hear it. I mean, fortunately, she is fascinating. I think I could talk about her for hours, and so it's never hard to have yet another conversation about the witch who had the unfortunate luck of dealing with Jason.
Ugh. I feel so sorry for her. Just any association with that man. God.
He's just awful, isn't he? Ugh. He's
just the worst. He's terrible. Like, I am a walking Jason hate club. I just loathe him.
Jason and Theseus, I could talk about it forever, just how much they ruined everything.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah, it's really hard to tell who is worse, I think. You know, I think they really, like, where one is not quite as bad, the other is awful, and then, you know, vice versa.
I think they're both bad in very different ways. Like, I always kind of think of Jason as being kind of like the archetypal fuckboy.
Yes.
Like, do you know what I mean? Like, he basically, he has this woman who he really relies on for, like, you know, all the emotional labor and, like, the physical labor of, like, doing his job for him. And then as soon as she becomes inconvenient, he just, like, leaves her messages on read. And he's like, I'm done with you. I've got this hot new lady wife, so...
He ghosts.
He does! Oh my god, he's the original ghoster. He actually is.
Well, and actually, he ghosts Hypsipyle, like, long before he ghosts Medea.
He's terrible! He's the worst.
Yeah, I think that's one thing, too, that's not talked about enough. And obviously this episode is about Medea, so we will focus on her. But poor Hypsipyle got fucked over by Jason before Medea ever did. And I mean, I think Hypsipyle probably bounced back pretty well because she was on an island of only women and was kind of okay with that. But, you know, at the same time, he's such a shit.
He has precedent.
Yeah, exactly. It's not his first.
No, like, his douchebaggery doesn't come out of nowhere. It's clearly like an established character trait.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's not many heroes that I think are outwardly good. but I just think he has no redeeming qualities.
No, he really doesn't. And like, I know that the focus of this isn't Jason, but I also feel
I know.
like it's really important to say that like Jason doesn't have anything good about him. Like,
No, exactly.
he doesn't. And I think that we kind of sort of talked about it before, but the fact that in terms of the Jason Medea narrative, actually he is such a passive figure in like the entire story. He just kind of is along for the ride while everybody else around him does all the hard work, and then he just gets the credit at the end.
Absolutely. I mean, his ship is manned by the most famous of all of the heroes, him being one of the least famous. I mean, also it notoriously has Atalanta, which is very cool. You know, there's a heroine on board. And who is it? It's Theseus, it's Heracles, it's Peleus, Orpheus. Is there anyone I'm forgetting that's major?
I think those are the major ones.
And then suddenly, you know, it's still somehow about Jason.
Yeah.
And then finally, you know, there's lots of adventure in between. It's not great. They get to Colchis, where Medea is, and then every single thing he has to do in order to get the Golden Fleece and keep Aeetes happy, or rather anger him horribly, he could not do without Medea. He's just utterly useless all around.
Yeah, he is. And I think that it's interesting how, in terms of like how we tend to talk about their whole kind of narrative arc, we tend to refer to it as like Jason and the Argonauts. Like, this is how we speak of it. But actually, if you look at the arc of the characters within that narrative, the hero's arc kind of belongs to Medea in a lot of ways. Like, I'm not saying that what she does is heroic, because obviously, like, there's a lot of, you know, murder.
It's not ideal.
it's not great. But in terms of who has the agency in that story, it's really not Jason.
No, definitely not. He's just sort of a background character in his own story, but is presented as if he's very much the hero.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the reception of their story, I mean, there's obviously quite a few examples, but the one that I always think of is like the Harryhausen film, Jason and the Argonauts. And like, he is this kind of incredibly like rugged, intelligent, kind of like Odysseus style hero in that film, in that he's portrayed as being quite cunning. He comes up with all these great plans, but then when you kind of look at the source material, you're like, oh, that's not Jason.
No, definitely not. It's all Medea. I mean, obviously things happen before they get to Colchis, but he doesn't do a lot of things that he, you know, alone. Like, it's always with the rest of the Argonauts. And so presumably, or certainly by all of the evidence we have, like, could he have done it alone? I don't know. Could he have gotten there alone and, you know, succeeded along the way? Or would he probably have crashed and burned?
I feel like he would have crashed and burned. I feel like if he could have done it alone, he would have.
Yeah, that's certainly what I think. I mean, he's something else, honestly.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that he deserved what happened to him, but I am saying that I hate him.
But also, I think it's such a... Well, and, you know, again, we should talk primarily about Medea, but everyone loves to hate on Jason, so it's fine. Do. But she makes kind of a point of not doing anything to him, right? Like, she doesn't physically hurt Jason. And, of course, you know, what she does to their children hurts Jason. And what she does to, you know, his new wife hurts him. But it's almost just in the same way that he was like passive in his heroic adventure story, that he's sort of equally a side character even in his fate. Like, he doesn't warrant actually being involved.
Now, that's actually a really good point. Like, all of Medea's vengeance is kind of focused around him, but not on him.
Yeah, as if it's worse, almost.
I think it is, yeah, because obviously then he has to, like, live to suffer what happens to him. He doesn't get the kind of easy out of, like, not being there.
Yeah, exactly. It's all, like, she really thinks out her punishment on Jason. And obviously, we don't condone what she did, but it's very satisfying to have his life ruined in that way.
Yeah, it kind of is. And then you feel like a dick for being like, I'm glad he's miserable.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I'm not glad the children are dead.
No, that's the thing. It's like, when we talk about Medea, you have to kind of preface every sentence with like, just to clarify, murder's bad. Like, don't murder, and she shouldn't have killed her children. Like, we need to get that out there, I think, pretty early on. What Medea does is very, very naughty, and we're not condoning that. We're just saying that you have to read it in the context of what she's experienced.
Exactly. And I think, well, I told her story twice. Once very early in the podcast before I had access to many sources, and also before I kind of had the same level of ability to parse out the stories and kind of see beyond the sources. And so, in the first one, it's very much like, oh, Medea is kind of crazy, and she's fascinating, but she's murderous. And then the second version I've told, it's more like, I can see how she got there. You can see why. I mean, the notorious thing about Medea is not only is she a woman in ancient Greece, which means she has absolutely no power, but she is a foreigner. She is not Greek. And so that gives her even less power. And so, when it comes to Jason then up and deciding to leave her, one, he can because she's not Greek. So they're technically not married. So he can just fuck off. And two, she has absolutely nothing. She's not a Greek. She's in a foreign land. She has no way to take care of herself, let alone her children. And then, so you can kind of get to where she got to, which is what is going to happen to her and her children if Jason gets away with what he's planning. And is somehow her decision, obviously it's not the right decision for her children, but you can see how she didn't want them to suffer, and so that was what she felt like was her only option.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. Like, I would say particularly in the Euripides version, it is kind of semi-portrayed as, like, mercy killing is the wrong word, but you know what I mean. Like, ultimately she's viewing her children's lives, and obviously bearing in mind that in order to help Jason, Medea had to essentially, like, destroy any chance she ever had of returning home, because she kills people. So she's fully exiled. She can never return. So once Jason boots her aside for this hot, young, actually Greek person, she is completely cast adrift. She can't go home, but she's also not Greek, so she's essentially stateless. Like, she doesn't have anywhere to go. So in tandem, her children have nowhere to go. So what kind of life do they have?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, that's notable too. She can't go home. And so, yeah, what can she do? And she doesn't kill herself, which is also interesting. Almost, I mean, I think you could pose the idea that it's a punishment to herself as well. She's punishing herself equally to Jason. She feels that guilt. She recognizes, or she feels in the moment, that all she can do is take the lives of her children in order to spare them what they would go through. But she doesn't take her own because she almost wants to live in that punishment.
Kind of like being a witness to what she's done in a way, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, sort of I think taking her own life might feel like the easy way out to her, or feel like she wasn't, that then the severity of what she had done is sort of lessened because she doesn't have to live through it.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. And I think there's also, like, I think we have to admit there's definitely an element of it where she's like, no, I want to see him suffer. Like, I want to be around to witness, like, the fallout of what I've done. And obviously the Euripides version of Medea is kind of like the best known version that we have, and that's the version that we assume originated the whole infanticide element of the myth. But there's obviously also other versions, some of which take that as its basis, some of which don't. And I suppose the most similar version, and one that I reread to prepare for this, is the Seneca version.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yes.
I still haven't gotten to read it, so now I'm very curious. I'm glad you read it.
It's very similar to Euripides in that the kind of like bare bones of the narrative are the same, but the way what she does is treated is slightly different. And I think that largely that's due to very boring reasons of Seneca's philosophy. Because obviously, like...
And I think a preface to my listeners, Seneca is Roman.
Yeah.
So he's much later and not Greek.
much later, like I think 500 years approximately later, so
Yeah, that
a
makes
long
sense.
time later. And he was basically essentially a Stoic philosopher. So his whole thing was kind of like controlling the passions and not allowing passions to rule each other and finding the perfect balance between emotions. So, which obviously Medea does not do. She very much is like taken over by like the spirits of vengeance and rage. So the way he treats it is sometimes more sympathetic towards her, in that he kind of makes it clear that what she's doing is not a well-reasoned act. So in his view, she's kind of been overtaken by like essentially pure emotion. And the whole play is kind of like a treatise on what happens when you don't rein it in and think about what you should do.
So it's a bit more, I mean, it sounds like it's much more critical of Medea.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like a double-edged sword in that I think it's more critical in that it makes it a lot clearer that what she does is terrible and awful and also completely rooted in the desire for vengeance. Like there's no hint that she's doing it for her children.
Right.
But then in a way it's more sympathetic because it says, but look, if she just thought about it, she wouldn't have done it. She's not evil.
Oh.
She's just like overcome with like raw emotion.
Oh, that's really interesting. So it's still he's still able to see her in a sympathetic light, see how she could have been different.
Yeah.
Does it portray her emotions as being particularly feminine, or are they sort of more broadly just emotions?
See, I think that's the really interesting thing, is that I actually don't think that it's intended to be read as like a purely feminine thing, purely because the whole sort of ethos of Stoicism is very much like kind of the universality of emotion and achieving the kind of balance between like emotion and reason. But I think that a lot of later receptions of it turn it into like a feminine thing. I mean, obviously, you have the famous quote of like, "Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned," and I think Medea is really often taken as like the perfect example of a woman scorned.
Well, certainly before I had read the play and before I had, a grasp on why it would have been like that, like why her story is more complex. My understanding of Medea was based in having just heard her name used to describe exactly that. An angry, vengeful woman and the damage she can cause because of that anger and vengeance. Whereas that's not really what it is. Like, obviously it's awful, it's bad, it's horrifying, but it's not like it came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
She didn't one day wake up horribly furious and just looking to kill her children for absolutely no reason.
No, and yeah, no, that is a really good point, that I think most people's kind of like gateway into the myth of Medea probably is the same as you, where they see somebody be like, oh, evil women from myth, and there's like a list of like top 5 evil women, and it's like Clytemnestra, Medea, like the same kind of people that you see on all these lists. And there's never really any acknowledgement that, like, again, what she does is very, very bad, not condoning
very
it,
bad,
but there's never like an acknowledgement that there's a thought process behind it, and that she doesn't just do it because she wants revenge. Like, yes, that is a part of it, and even in Euripides that's very much presented as a part of it, and we can't really divorce that from her entirely. But it's not a place of like immorality or evil. It's very much a considered complex, nuanced motive that I think is really reductive to just characterize as, well, that's what women do when they're upset.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not about her being a woman. Everything that was done to her would be just as bad if it were done to a man, except for the whole implications of being a woman in ancient Greece. But that doesn't have anything to do with actual gender and sex policies. It's all to do with, patriarchy.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's just it's an interesting thing the way it has been taken over time, and the way she is categorized as this like explicitly evil woman. And I didn't really intend to cover the first two conversations in this whole month of women being like Clytemnestra and Medea. But, I think they're such good examples of, yes, they did horrifying things. We absolutely do not condone murder. But at the same time, there's a reason why the women felt like they had to do these things in this ancient world.
Yeah, no, completely. And also the fact that there's also a lot of men in myth who have done, I would argue, probably worse things than Medea, Clytemnestra, basically any woman who is now considered to be like an evil, awful bitch, like from myth. You have heroes, like specific heroes, capital H, who have done so much worse. Like Achilles. He was a bastard.
Oh, God.
Like, yeah. Jesus Christ. Theseus, like, serial killer. Like, come on.
Serial killer. Heracles killed his entire family.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. How much do we talk about the fact that Heracles killed his whole family, his wife and 2 children?
I feel like the few times that's ever mentioned, it's like a footnote. It's like, yeah, the 12 labours of Heracles. I mean, sort of killed his family. But let's talk about the 12 labours of Heracles. It's like, hang on, you just skipped over, like, mass murder.
Mm-hmm. And the emphasis is always that it was because of Hera.
Yeah.
Hera made him kill his family.
Yeah, and again, if we're really going to go down the route of, like, gods and goddesses making people do things, I mean, the gods aren't innocent in Medea's narrative, because arguably she would never have fallen in love with Jason without the gods' interference.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, I think she's smarter than that.
Yeah, she has better taste.
Yeah, exactly. Ovid tells her story in Metamorphoses, which is beautiful and just mostly about her dragon chariot, but also in Heroides, which I've sort of caught up on a couple of pages of. And for one, it's just so beautifully done. And the Heroides are something I haven't covered a lot in the podcast, but they are letters written by women to heroes who have, wronged them in some way. And so Hypsipyle has one to Jason too, which is interesting. But Medea's, it's so very much about like, why did he come there in the first place? Why did that have to happen? So she says, like, why was a ship made from Pelion's wood rowed so quickly? And why did I take too much pleasure in your golden hair, your fine ways, and the lies that fell so gracefully from your tongue?
Oh,
like, it's just, I mean, it's so beautiful. It's Ovid, but it's so interesting and very much, and granted, that's just kind of the point of the Heroides, but it's very much like, Jason is awful, and how did I get myself into this, and why did you come here ever in the first place, and what my life would have been if you'd never come here at all.
Yeah, that's a really good way of looking at it, actually. It's like, what would she have been like if none of that had ever happened to her? Like, if she'd just been allowed to live her like lovely witchy life on Colchis, just being fine, like, what would have happened?
Yeah, well, so the first 4 lines of the poem are, and I remember that I, Queen of Colchis, found time when you came begging for help. Indeed, those sisters who spin the threads of life should have unwound at my last spindle. So she's basically saying, like, I wish the fates could take it back or had stopped it before you'd even come and any of this had started. It's very like kind of explicit of like, oh, what would I have been if it weren't for Jason?
Yeah. Oh, that's sad. Oh, Medea.
I mean, yeah, this is queen. I mean, queen or princess, whatever. She was royalty on Colchis. She was the daughter of essentially a god, if not explicitly a god, a deity. She was godly. She was royalty. She was powerful and super magical. Like, in ancient Greek myths, she would have never had a chance to do anything incredible because women don't get that chance really. But if you're going to theorize about it, the possibilities were endless.
They really were. And I feel like so many of the things that gave her possibilities, like the fact that she was, princess of Colchis, and the fact that she has these really fucking cool magical abilities. I feel like so many of those things are also kind of the architects of her downfall, because those are things which really differentiate her, from like, I mean, there's no other way to put it, but I guess like normal, expected, typical Greek women in myth anyway, not like, in general. And they're also things which I think kind of alienate her from like the role of a woman in myth. Does that make sense? Like many of the ways in which she's different are kind of, they make her more powerful, but they also in tandem make her less powerful.
Yeah, it's like she's not quite immortal and she's not quite a god. And so while in theory that grants her more power than a mortal, but the fact that she's in between both just sort of ends up serving to bring her down in a sort of unexpected way. And the fact that she is magical as much as it is power too, like you're saying, it sets her apart, and it also, it just makes her, I guess, different in a way that she then, it's hard to phrase, becomes more problematic, I suppose. I mean, certainly she uses her magic for bad because of Jason, but I think there are versions too where, I'm trying to remember where I read it, but essentially where like her father, Aeetes, is like torturing people on Colchis all the time, and she wants him to stop, and that's almost why she helps Jason, is she's trying to stop her father, and Jason is there to steal something from her father and therefore hurt him, so she's gonna help him.
Yeah.
And I think that's an interesting way, because it really starts her off on a good foot as like someone who's trying to do good, and then in an attempt to do good, she helps like the absolute wrong man, and then her life goes downhill,
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, in the fact that because she does exist in this kind of like liminal space between like deity and mortal, and also like woman and not quite woman, purely because she doesn't perform the expected gender roles of like what would kind of constitute like a mythical ancient Greek woman. She has all this power, but she doesn't have the narrative role that enables her to take agency of that power. Like her power has to be in service to someone else, and unfortunately it ends up in the service of like grade A fuckboy complete wet towel Jason.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And also wet towel Jason is an outstanding way to describe him.
I mean, he's got the personality of like a used dishcloth. I really just hate him.
He absolutely does. He really doesn't have any kind of personality at all. He's just sort of like generic man in the worst way imaginable.
Yeah, I just hate him. Like when I was a kid, I used to love the Jason the Argonauts film. Like I loved it. I would watch it like every week. But I haven't watched it in quite a long time now. And part of it is because I'm like, no, hang on, this guy's awful. I don't want to watch a version in which he gets to do stuff.
I still haven't seen it, and I really need to. I've been meaning to watch it and like live tweet hate it.
I do recommend watching it because it genuinely has like an interesting take on Medea, and I think it has good points and bad points. Like it's good in that for a piece of classical reception, like meaning a modern work that takes the classics as its basis, it's quite good in that it doesn't completely diminish her role within the narrative. Like it doesn't reduce her to like, ooh, sexy spicy lady who is along for the ride. Like it doesn't do that. She does have an active role.
Well, that's good.
It is, but I think it definitely falls into the pitfall that a lot of other works of reception do, which is they have a female character, so by God, she better be sexy. And like you have all these scenes of her. I mean, I think the first time you see Medea, and they actually, it's a double-edged sword in the film, because also the fact that she is in the myth a non-Greek barbarian woman. Obviously 1960s were not, the most progressive eras.
Were they not?
not the most. And there's definitely a sometimes slightly uncomfortable kind of like exoticism or like fetishizing of her exotic nature, which often manifests in like some kind of like generically quote unquote like ethnic music playing in the background, and she's there covered in like gold paint. But you know, they did their best, I
think. Well, yeah, that sounds like the 60s and or, you know, much more recent than that. But
yeah. I mean, that there's a whole other episode in, you know, modern takes on women from Greek myth. But I do think that we've yet to see a version of Medea kind of either on screen or like in literature or really kind of anything that I feel does the narrative as much justice as it could.
I agree. I mean, there's not a lot. Obviously, the play is performed a lot, but there's not a lot of otherwise, you know, pop culture reception of her. Like, I can't really think of much.
No, I genuinely can't. Like, if you were to ask me for like any kind of modern adaptation of Medea, I would probably just end up saying like maybe a play in which a woman kills her children. Maybe that's like based on it somehow, non-explicitly, but probably takes some kind of artistic license with the original source. I don't know. I can't think of anything that would name itself as Medea.
I realized there was a 90s, I think it was like a mini series, TV, like straight to TV of Jason, and it starred, his name is also Jason. He was like a star from the 90s, really generic man, like deeply Jason. There's just so much to say about her, but also it tends to be like a lot of repeating the same points, I think, of like just how misunderstood she's been in everything.
Yeah. I mean, I think that every conversation about Medea, you kind of have to cover like, there's like 3 points you have to make. And the first point is the one we've made 8,000 times, murder bad. And then the second point is like, Medea not evil, like she had reasons. And then the third point, I think, is like, just consider for 1 second what you would do if you were in her position. Like, you had no home, you had 2 children, your husband was going around town, like, being photographed with this hot new wife. Like what would you do?
Especially when you don't hold any power in the world. Like, the power you have is the power over your children, because that, as a woman, is basically all they had. They could have children, and very little else belonged to women. So, I mean, it's like, it's horrific, but it also is just sort of the only way she could exert any kind of power in the relationship and in her life was that her family was the only thing she had any kind of control over.
Yeah, and I think that when you're talking about that, like, I wonder if part of the reason that nowadays Medea is kind of portrayed as like, you know, amoral, terrible, awful, evil, heinous bitch is because we don't have that kind of cultural context. So I wonder if we find it more difficult to kind of like contextualize what she does, because her lived experience is, I mean, obviously not entirely different, because I think that you'd be a complete idiot to say that women aren't still like primarily identified on a very kind of cis-normative, heteronormative viewpoint of like woman equals having children. But I think that there's slightly more opportunity, at least in a kind of modern context. Like, I think it makes it more difficult to view Medea as like having no other choice.
Yeah, exactly. Like, at least we do have some abilities, you know, in the current world beyond. I mean, I am someone who will literally never have children and never even consider the idea of them. So I personally am incredibly grateful that I live in this world where I am allowed to do that, and I can have a career and a life beyond relationship and children. Thank the gods. But that's the thing, you know, in order to fully understand her, you do have to put yourself in that position of, you know, an ancient world where women were property and didn't own anything themselves and didn't have any power or agency or abilities of their own. Everything they had lay in their ability to get married and have children.
Yeah, and like run a perfect household and be the perfect wife and the perfect mother. And like I say, I do think that, broadly speaking, society still places that pressure on women. But I think that Medea's crime in particular, I mean, obviously she commits more murders than just the infanticide.
Yeah.
Like she does. But I would say that she's largely kind of identified by the infanticide. Like if you were to ask just the like somebody on the street, like, oh, who did Medea kill? They would say her children. And I think that even though we find it difficult to empathize with her because we're like, oh, women have, you know, more opportunities, they aren't just baby making machines, we still view, for, you know, good reason, but we still view the murder of a child by particularly the mother as kind of like the worst imaginable crime. Like there's nothing worse than somebody who chooses to bring a child into the world and then kills the child.
Yeah, you're quite right there.
Yeah, so it's like a kind of weird sort of double-edged sword in that on one side we can't empathize with her because we're like, oh, well, women aren't just mothers. But on the other side, we're like, but she was a mother. How could she do that?
Yeah, and you're right. The pressure on women to have children is still very much there. It's certainly in no way gone. It suggests the idea that it's worse for a woman to do it than for a man. Like, certainly Jason wouldn't be so notorious if he had killed the children instead. I mean, just look at Heracles. That's exactly what he did. And yet we have a Disney hero riding Pegasus and looking adorable. And I love that movie, don't get me wrong. But I also like to share gifs of that movie of him and Meg and say, hey, spoilers, in the future, he's going to kill her and their two children. So there you have it. Like, yeah, it's an interesting thing. It's certainly the fact that she's a woman who does that, it makes it so much harder for anyone to sort of see beyond that and into why she might have felt like that was her only option, or what is it about her as a person that might have, you know, caused that kind of anything. I mean, just anything about her as a person. I think people don't look into that at all. It's all just Medea killed her children, so she's a monster, she's evil.
Yeah, there's definitely no awareness that there's any reason that she would do that beyond her being the ultimate evil, because ultimately she does commit what is kind of conceived as the ultimate crime. And I don't know how much I spoke about the idea of the whole kind of like monster theory type thing.
That was in our previous try. So please tell the current listeners about the monster theory.
Well, it's a theory that you are supposed to kind of apply to like actual monsters. So Medusa is a very good example of it. But essentially, monster theory is the idea that monsters are a cultural body. So they represent things that the culture that constructs them is afraid of. And it's a way of literally embodying a set of fears. So again, if you're going to take that back to Medusa, you could argue that Medusa is emblematic of the fear of kind of like the sexually transgressive woman, or you could make an argument that she represents the fear of, you know, victim blaming or becoming a victim. And as I say, you're supposed to apply this really to an actual monster. But one of the definitions of what makes a monster is that they kind of exist between worlds and also between bodies, so they're not easily categorized. And I would probably argue that in a lot of ways Medea is actually quite a good example of someone that you could apply this theory to, because she is somebody who exists between like the spheres of what's recognizable and known and the kind of scary magic world where things are kind of intangible and a bit dark and a bit spooky. And then the fact that she does then commit this, you know, terrible crime, she kills her children, I think there's a lot of scope to kind of say that, okay, well, you could use her as an example to discuss the fear of motherhood, or the fear of transgressing motherhood. Do you know, does that make sense? Like, even though she's not a monster, the deed that she does ultimately is monstrous. And I think that you can look at that in a context and say, okay, not only is this a morally complex woman who is committing a crime for myriad reasons, but she also stands for something, A, within the narrative itself, and then B, within the culture that received that narrative. So obviously, you know, Euripides, if he's the original or oldest extant version of that myth, then what the people in his day and age would have thought upon hearing this version of her story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's very interesting and true. And I also think, as much as she's not a physically monstrous person, she would have been viewed as a sort of metaphorical monster, certainly. So I think it's not a stretch to apply that to her, even in that sort of that context of, yes, she, you know, she didn't have snakes for hair, but she also wasn't seen as particularly human because of what she did. When you're talking about Euripides being the oldest extant version of her killing her children, because obviously he's not the oldest version of her, but of her killing her children, certainly. But my favorite thing to just imagine is what the audience would have experienced watching Medea. And I think, I mean, there's so many things they would have experienced, from the fact that she killed her children, to the way in which he portrayed it, which I think it's always important to bring up because it's incredible, in that he would have used the machinery that they had available at the time on their stages, and the machinery that was intended exclusively for the gods. And the use of it in Medea is the first time it was used for not a god, because the intention would have been to portray the gods sort of almost floating over the stage or on a chariot over the stage, because they were godly. It's the deus ex machina in Latin. And Medea, it was used to show her gliding over the stage in her dragon chariot with the bodies of her children. And I mean, if you are sitting in the Theater of Dionysus in Athens, you're at the Great Dionysia. It's a whole crazy, incredible festival with phallic imagery everywhere. Penises everywhere. And you're watching this play, and like, you're expecting a tragedy, sure, but are you expecting this level of tragedy where, you know, a woman provides a poisoned crown and cloak to a princess, melts her skin off, the father tries to save her, his skin gets melted off, and you think, okay, well, this must be the height of the tragedy of today. And then, no. You keep going, and the final scene is her appearing with a dragon drawn chariot over the top of the stage with her dead children. And then, you know, I mean, there's just so many things that would have been in that play that would have been absolutely shocking and disturbing. And certainly it was, because it did not win any awards. And I think it was one of his earlier plays too, right? And
yeah.
it just would have, I mean, the level of shock that would have come, also because the at the first performance of it, it would have been all men watching. And so, like, the fear that would have been in those men watching this woman like kill a king and then punish her husband by killing their male children. Like, it's so many things in one. And I just would have I want to see the fear and discomfort in the audience's eyes.
Yeah, you can kind of see why it came. It came last, right? Like, I'm pretty sure it came like stone cold last.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Certainly didn't win. Certainly didn't win.
No. Which makes it interesting that it's one of the ones that has survived, like, to this day. I mean, I suppose there's an argument to be made that because obviously it was a fairly controversial piece, maybe that added to its survival, but, you know, it's still interesting.
It definitely is. And I think one of the things I'm pretty sure is accurate before I say it of Euripides is that he was one of those artists who found all his fame in death. You know, Bacchae, I feel like I've learned this before and always forget that Bacchae was performed first after he'd already died. It was finished and performed after his death, which is interesting because it's also one of his most famous. But he so many of the plays that exist for us today that, have made it through time are because he was put into school books, but after his death. And then the other ones that we have are just because some random collector kept his things in better working order than Aeschylus and Sophocles' collectors. And I mean, that's fascinating in itself. Like, the reasons why we have these things and what we don't have is just like mind boggling to me all the time. And I think about it at least once a day. But yeah, I mean, so I think for him, and the reason why Medea would have been so popular, in addition to it being wildly controversial, is just that he did find such fame after he was already dead. And I think people learned to appreciate him after his death in a way that wasn't the case with at least the other two that we know well, Sophocles and Aeschylus. They were much more appreciated in their lifetimes.
Yeah, that makes sense. They were kind of like the One Direction of, the Greek play world, whereas I suppose he was more like a Jeff Buckley.
Yes. Perfect examples.
A wealth of pop culture knowledge.
But yeah, is there anything else that you want, any other points you want to make about Medea today?
I don't know if, because I remember last time we were recording this, you kind of brought up the fact that I completely forgot about, which was that after the narrative ends, like the familiar narrative where she kills the children, the fact that she then does another bad, and and I was thinking about that. Like, I was reading a few sources about the fact that after, obviously, Medea has committed infanticide, her story does not end there. In fact, she goes on to attempt to kill somebody else.
Everyone's most hated asshole. So we applaud her for that one, honestly.
We
all
do.
The best to you, Medea.
I wish you'd
well
succeeded.
tried. You attempted it.
I know. I really wish you'd done it.
Yeah. But so Medea does move on to Athens and tries to kill Theseus. One interesting thing because I think you're right, that part isn't mentioned a lot, but she meets Aegeus in the Euripides play. Aegeus just happens to wander on by and essentially like makes a deal with her right then and there that he will do whatever she needs. And so once she has killed her children and the royal family of Corinth, she has to leave Corinth, weirdly. She has to seek purification in another city. That's the way it worked when you killed someone, at least in myth. And so she just goes to Athens, and not only does Aegeus purify her of these sins, but he marries her. And then when Theseus arrives after his serial killing spree on the road from Treason to Athens, he makes her angry, I guess, but also I don't blame her. He's an absolute piece of shit. So Medea probably just took one look at him and was like, I know you don't deserve anything in this world. And, you're a threat to me, and also you're a piece of human garbage. And so she does try to kill Theseus. Unfortunately, she fails. Theseus doesn't kill her or anything. She just fails, and then she's like, fuck it. Like, I'm done with Greece. I'm super over it. And that's when she just heads back to Colchis, to whatever life she has there. I mean, enough time has passed that maybe her father's died or something, and she's allowed to go back. We don't know anything more about her after that, but I do love that she tries to kill Theseus.
Yeah,
and I mean, who
wouldn't?
I mean, honestly, I would love to. It's too bad Ariadne didn't have the thought too.
Oh, I know. I mean, I wish that everyone who ever encountered him did. Like, at least one of them had a chance, right?
Right?
No, I read a thingy. I can't remember what the source was. I want to say it was a Roman dude, which I know does not narrow it down, but like some guy, he wrote down that the reason that Medea attempted to kill Theseus was because she was concerned that the return of Theseus would impact on her own children's, like, inheriting the
right. Yes.
throne.
Yeah, and, because she'd had children with Aegeus at that time.
Yeah. And I just found that kind of, like, fascinating, because obviously the murder that she is most famous for is killing her children. But then after that, she kind of does, like, a complete 180 in a way, and she attempts to commit murder again, like, to benefit her children. But it's not the children that she victimizes. Does that make sense?
Well, it does, and I think that it indicates that it wasn't about her being evil and wanting to kill her children just to kill her children, which of course we know and defend it all the time, and this whole episode is in defense of that. But it indicates it in a classical source that this was not about her being evil and murderous just for the sake of it. There was a purpose, and now that she has children that she knows can survive their situation because she has married Aegeus, this king, like she once again worries about their survival in their current situation, but recognizes that there's a solution, an outside solution, and that is simply killing Theseus. Which, I mean, what if Medea's children had been those mythological founders of Athens instead of Theseus?
Yeah,
what a world we might have.
Better place. God, yeah. They treat their stray cats better, that's for sure. But yeah, no, I just find it fascinating, like I've said before, but just the fact that, I mean, as you say, I think it contextualizes the earlier murder in a really interesting way. I think it adds credence to the theory that she is doing it, at least in part, on behalf of her children. Like, she is ultimately viewed in, certainly in a modern sense, and one presumes probably in an ancient sense, as like the mother who transgresses in the ultimate way. She kills her children, she is indefensible. But then you look at her, I mean, her track record, like the fact that all the people that she kills, she ultimately does so to benefit the people that she loves. Again, not justifying, just contextualizing. And I think it kind of casts her character in a more nuanced light. Maybe?
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I think that's true. I also think probably that source is Plutarch.
It could be. I was trying to look it up, but I completely forgot. So, let's say it's Plutarch, because he wrote things.
He wrote The Life of Theseus, which there's a lot in there. Okay. For good or bad. It's a lengthy work.
Yeah, not one that I will be reading, because I don't want to read that much about Theseus, to be honest.
I've read good chunks of it for when I redid his story recently, which was actually so much fun because he's so awful that I told it in like 4 parts, and he's just such a little dick that it made for some really entertaining podcasting. But that would be the only reason I would have read Plutarch's Life of Theseus.
Ugh, disgusting.
Good guys. Theseus and Jason, everyone's favorite.
Yeah, like I genuinely would be so interested in if they ever did like a kind of modern sitcom about like Jason and Theseus are like these really bro-y like flatmates, and they're just like the absolute fucking worst.
Yep, and then Ariadne and Medea are sort of the reluctant, like, next-door neighbor
yes!
flatmates who are just kind of watching them with utter disdain, and maybe Dionysus comes and they have, like, a throuple between them and just continue their lives whilst laughing at the broy neighbors.
Hi, Hollywood. We are available.
We have an incredible idea. Give us a call.
I'm free weekends.
Well, I feel like that might be the absolute perfect way to end this episode on Medea with the world's best television show idea. So, once again, thank you so much for talking with me, Anwen. This is always so much fun.
Thanks for having me. It's been a riot.
I'm very glad. Again, for the second time now between us. Third time chatting, second time about Medea. But I think we had some even better points this time. So everyone's getting a better episode than they would have if we hadn't fucked up the first one.
Yeah, it's like the fates intervened and they were like, your brains were too mushy last time. Be clearer.
Exactly. They were so mushy. So, as everyone should know by now, you do have a novel about Medusa. So once again, would you plug your novella, I should say, about Medusa?
I'm very bad at plugging. I'm like a broken bathtub, but...
So am I.
It is called Here the World Entire. It is a novella retelling the myth of Medusa from her point of view. It is very short, so you can read it in a very short space of time if you have a short attention span like me. And some people have described it as okay and not bad.
I really liked it, I'll say. I have read it and I really quite enjoyed it.
Thank you.
I think it was a wonderful way to retell Medusa's story, and I highly recommend it to everyone. Also, like you said, it was short. And I lately am so busy reading everything for the podcast all the time that I rarely am able to sit down and read things for the joy of it. But it was short enough that I could sit down in one sitting and read it and thoroughly enjoyed it.
It's a cohesive narrative.
Exactly. Yeah, and so everyone can find you on Twitter at Kyatic.
Yeah, which is a name that I do regret choosing, but it's
No, I love it.
Well, it's based on my horribly misspelt middle name, which is Kaya. So Kyatic is my Twitter handle.
It's a play on chaotic, and I've always quite enjoyed it.
Thank you. God,
just here to support you.
I was going to say, this is lovely. I'm being complimented left, right, and centre.
But I do highly recommend everyone follow you on Twitter, because that's certainly how we got to this point where we can just have two full conversations about Medea in addition to our very wonderful conversation about Medusa earlier. So yeah, highly recommend that. And then remind us of your Tumblr about mythology.
Oh yeah, so I have a Tumblr blog where I swear about myth a lot and retell mythology, and it's mythologymondays.tumblr.com.
Perfect. Everyone can find you everywhere. And thank you again so much for doing this. It's always so much fun.
Thanks for having me. Again.
Oh, nerds, thank you all so much for listening. Like I said at the top, it's just such a thrill that I get to do this. I can't even express to you all the cool things I've gotten to learn from talking to all these people, and all the people I will get to talk to and learn from going forward. If you like this episode and the podcast, consider a rating and review. Have you pre-ordered my book yet? If not, what are you waiting for? It keeps getting delayed by a week, so you have more time. Head to mythsbaby.com/book to find pre-order links, or straight up just Google Greek mythology book with Liv Albert and you're going to find it. Next week, the remainder of The Phoenician Women by Euripides, and another exciting conversation episode. Thank you all so much. You're the best. This is very cool. I am Liv, and I love this shit.